Today, I will tell you about the confrontation of good and evil in one village that can. In the village where Amanda lived, there were two witches. Everyone knew about it. Everyone spit on them 3 times and almost everyone once. But almost everyone decided for himself which of these options is better to decide. In the village where Amanda lived, there were 2 witches. Everyone knew about it. Everyone spit in their direction 3 times. But almost everyone once turned to either one or the other. One was Amanda's grandmother. Grace is a sweet and friendly old woman, always neat and friendly, never a bad word about anyone. So the village loved her only for good works, so her fame spread. She was the perfect opposite of Grace, who never said hello to anybody. She lived in the outskirts of the village. And no one knew what she did. And people who came to her were either bad people, spoilers, hexes, or desperate people ready to do anything. Amanda that spring had an adventure. She was courted by the son of the chairman. She was riding his bicycle to the store, and he was chasing her in his car and flirts with her. It would have been all right if Amanda had liked him a little, but on the contrary, she could not stand him. He was conceited, self-confident, with a crooked grin and bad manners. David did not understand how anyone could not like him. He knew the son of the chairman has the right to everything, and therefore he was entertained by the girl's whims. Grandmother Grace, watching the suffering of her granddaughter, suggested doing a reversal so that David would forget the way to their house. Amanda agreed, with her own hands made amulet for her granddaughter and held the necessary ritual. David decided not to wait by the sea and to finally get Amanda's favor. For help, he naturally turned to Joyce, and though it was quite a coward, he should teach a lesson. Joyce was glad to have such a guest. She would teach the granddaughter of her arch-rival a lesson she had waited for a long time and would not miss it for the world. She put the frightened David on the bench so that he did not disturb her. She began to make a potion. When everything was ready, she gave the bottle to David and explained she had to get the girl drunk within 24 hours. Otherwise, it would not work. Otherwise, it will not work. And if he succeeds, Amanda will be with him for the rest of his life. David's head was full of thoughts how to get her drunk, if Amanda did not allow him to come to the door. Not thinking long, he decided to sneak into their family at night and reveal the contents of the bottle in a bucket of water. Tomorrow morning, Amanda wanted to drink the water and the potion would work. But it wasn't Amanda who came out first to drink. But Grandma Grace took her first sip and nearly died on the spot. The pain twisted the poor old woman so that she just howled. All day long, Grace did not leave the house, lying there with no strength. And when Amanda asked her why the old witch, she told a long story in her youth when she and Joyce were friends and were both courted by the same guy, Marcus, whom both Grace and Joyce were in love with. But he chose Grace, and Joyce has had a grudge against her ever since. Joyce has lived her whole life alone and has gone into witchcraft. Joyce lived all her life alone and was scared of the whole village, trying to charm Grace's husband several times, but all in vain. But Grace and Marcus lived in love and happiness, married and had children. Grace never dreamed of any gift. After Marcus died suddenly, and she was seriously ill, her husband came to her in a dream and told her to get up and live for the children, and to withstand the attacks of the Black Witch. Marcus gave her the gift. One day, Grace woke up so much and she was so scared. Then she got used to helping people and lived like that. But Joyce was still waiting for the right moment to take revenge. Grace ordered her granddaughter to pour poisoned water under Joyce's grandmother's doorstep to repay her with her own evil, and a war broke out between the 2 witches, each summoning her own elements to help. All the powers and magical knowledge was at work at nights. The neighbors were afraid to go out in the street. There was something incredible going on. Talk and gossip about the war between the 2 witches was at every step. If anyone had no sleep or a cattle got sick, they blamed it all on this war. Grace had already gone to bed, and suddenly she heard a strange rustling in her granddaughter's room, opened her eyes, and was frightened. Her girl, like a lunatic in her nightgown, had gone away somewhere from home. Grandma understood the reason and ran after. Grandmother Grace understood that her granddaughter was not voluntarily sleepwalking. She knew that her arch-rival was calling Amanda, but she could not stop. You cannot touch the sleepwalker who is under a magic spell. And then Grace saw Joyce standing at the edge of the lake. The two old women, forgetting about their advanced years, came together in battle. She slowly got to her feet and wanted to go, but she stepped on a sharp, dry log. No one expected such an outcome. The death of this innocent girl has reconciled the two witches. But no one knows for how long. Sometimes one careless step can ruin your whole life. It is not without reason they say all that happens in time, and you should not joke about it because there may not be a second chance. Love must be sincere and mutual. You cannot play with the feelings of those who entrusted you their heart, because the truth will still be revealed, and then the reaction of the deceived woman can be unpredictable. Thomas finished his studies in the capital and returned home to the village, but he came not alone, but with his wife Emily. It was a surprise for Thomas's parents. The young couple got married in the city quietly, and now they just put their relatives before the fact. The only person who has not put up with the secret marriage of Thomas was his school friend Agnes. She was in love with the boy from childhood, and all these years she expected the same thing. Thomas's former classmate did not fail to inform about it. The girl became suspicious. Agnes tried to control her feelings, but she couldn't bear to see the couple in love. She had been waiting for his coming back for 5 long years, making plans, hoping she would be his faithful and loving wife, and he had brought some upstart from the city. It was above her strength to see Thomas happy with another girl. The young couple were slowly settling into their new status, and Emily decided to ask her husband more about this Agnes. She did not like her, and Thomas did not seem to be jealous of her, but she felt that Agnes would spoil them, and just while the boys were looking at the school photographs, Agnes called to help in the household. Emily was annoyed with the calls. Thomas did not see anything wrong in them. He could not refuse Agnes. She was an orphan. She was his ex-roommate. She had grown up without a father, and the family lacked male hands. So he helped her as a friend, and now that he got married, he even more responded to her requests. He did not want to offend her, but Thomas had not expected it. Agnes's declaration of love fell on him like a snowball. It cost Thomas considerable efforts to get out of her arms and leave. He understood that he was leaving her for good, and sad as it was, their friendship was off. Agnes was not going to let anybody take her beloved. In an alleged encounter, Agnes whispered some curses in her rival's ear and threatened that she would take Thomas away anyway. Emily was very hurt by these words, but her husband calmed his wife in the end. What could she do? In the evening, Emily felt very bad. After 24 hours, she was burning. Gray in the eyes was bruises. Thomas understood that delay was no longer possible, and in spite of his wife's protests, he called a doctor. The doctor diagnosed the common cold, prescribed medicine, and promised Thomas that in a couple of days his wife would be fine. Emily was convinced that her condition. The fortune teller performed magic procedures over the body of the dying woman. Thomas was exhausted, but soon Emily regained consciousness. She felt better. Her fever was gone, but she had no strength to speak. But the fortune teller was not silent because her illness was associated with a very strong curse. The woman tried to understand who did it, but she could not. She made a ritual, removed the curse, and sent her back. She said that now he who had put a curse on Emily would receive 100-fold, and Emily would recover. All that remained was to wait. Thomas thought that he didn't care what happened as long as his beloved was healthy. In the morning, a policeman called Thomas and asked him to come to Agnes's house. He couldn't understand what had happened, but when he entered the yard, he couldn't believe his eyes. The body of his childhood friend was carried out by the nurses. The cause of Agnes's death remained unknown, but the body showed traces of violent death. Thomas was called to give evidence, but he could not help the investigation of the case. Thomas returned home depressed. He had never had to bury his friends before, especially since Agnes's death left many questions. But at home there was surprise. His wife's illness had finally recovered, and Emily felt fine, but not for long. That night, Thomas had to remember his girlfriend. It was a bad, bad dream, but the boy could not wake up. Agnes's ghost called him. He asked him to come with him, and when Thomas refused, he clung to him and pulled him with incredible strength from the strange activity in the room. Emily woke up. The ghost immediately disappeared, and the girl saw only her husband lying in the doorway. Thomas told his beloved what happened. He thought that it was just a dream, to feel the loss of his friend. But the bruise on his hand told the contrary. Emily was frightened and insisted on seeing the sorceress again. She used the old-fashioned way to remove the spell, rolling out the egg. But she could not help him because Thomas had the seal of death. Kathy's ghost was going to take him to his grave, and it was almost impossible to be saved. The witch could not save his body, but she could save his soul. She had to speak a stone and put it on Thomas's grave after his death to prevent Agnes to take his soul with her and torment it forever. That night the man became convinced that the witch was right. The ghost of Agnes was choking Thomas with hatred. Emily rushed to help her husband, but was thrown back by a wave of unseen power, not knowing what else to do. The woman closed her eyes and started to read a prayer. Soon there was silence, and Emily understood that the ghost had disappeared, but her lover was not breathing. In tears, Emily struck her husband's chest and her heart, and suddenly the first rattle sounded from his throat. She thought her husband died of suffocation from hell. The young people were troubled. They understood that a day is but a pause between nightmares, and if nothing is done, this night may be the last of their lives. Suddenly an idea struck Thomas. It was mad, but he saw no other way out, and Emily supported him. She understood the risk, but doing nothing and waiting to die was worse. Thomas's plan was simple and scary. He decided to put the stone that he had spoken with the sorceress, not on his, but on Agnes's grave. He was sure for some reason that it would make the deceased to calm down, but to carry out his plan, Thomas had to overcome many obstacles. The devilry began to occur as soon as he reached the cemetery gate. Others might have been frightened, but the man was determined to go on, no matter what it cost him. In the meantime, Emily woke up with a terrible cold. Her breath was steaming as if in the midst of winter. Outside, the girl almost lost her mind. From the horror in front of her stood a sign of Amelia. But something prevented her from reaching her rival, as if some invisible wall stood between her and the hated rival Amelia has come to rage and raged even more. But she could not overcome this barrier while the evil spirit of Amelia tried to get to Emily. Thomas wandered in the pitch darkness on the cemetery paths in search of the grave of his former girlfriend. But it was not so easy to find her. Dark forces cast a spell on the boy, trying to throw him off the path, but he still made his way to the goal. Amelia cowered in a corner and clasped her eyes. Amelia's ghost hovered over her, trying to break through the invisible barrier, and still could not do anything. Amelia was simply beside herself, and she was gathering energy for one last strike as soon as the mojo dissipated. Thomas saw a grave without a cross. He knew at once whose it was, and he was not mistaken. The guy risked his own life, but still threw the enchanted stone as he was going to. It was as if an invisible fog enveloped Emily, and Amelia was unable to break through this obstacle. There was an amazing silence in the cemetery. All obsessions vanished in 1 second. Amelia's ghost crumbled into ashes right in front of Emily. No scars on her arms, no traces of asphyxiation. Thomas realized that he had won. The boy was ready to collapse from exhaustion, but he remembered Emily and hurried home. He was sure that his wife was well, but he wanted to be sure of that. Emily passionately talked about the horror she had experienced and how suddenly a protective cocoon formed around her. Thomas was surprised what magic helped them, but Emily knew the answer to this question. The expectant mother was sure that their child protected her from the attack of the ghost. The couple were happy. They knew that now they will have everything well. Do not play with fire because you can ignite the flames of anger and hatred which will be very difficult to quench. Appreciate other people's feelings, and then you will not have to pay so dearly for your actions.